Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Osi Nurpiani. My student's number is 2021222065 and me as moderator of group language assessment. We are from group 2, class B, and the member of this group consists of 7 people. They are Ditami Melani with NPM 070 as the first presenter, Rayhani Fitri Salsabila with NPM 051 as the second presenter, and Hadi Hadiatullah with NPM 079 as the third presenter, and Salsa Amalia Nurfadila with NPM 057 as the fourth presenter, Fauzia Azahra with NPM 048 as the fifth presenter, Siti Alifatunisa with NPM 075 as the sixth presenter, and me Osinopiani with NPM 065 as the moderator and the last presenter. Today we are going to explain about chapter 2, what we do access. Alright, without any further ado, let's start our presentation. From the first presenter.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Detami Melani Sopadatiar. My student's number is 2021222070. Here, I would like to present the materials about what is word teaching and assessing. Alright, the first question is, what is word teaching? Teaching is more than just covering important content. Teaching means that students have learned what is taught. Goals and outcomes may be explicitly defined for a full program by benchmark and standard, curriculum, and external tests, or implicitly defined by teachers through textbook in the classroom. Teachers may also define outcomes by eliciting information from their students through need analysis, student-student interaction, student-teacher interaction, student self-assessment, and so on. Now let's take a look at the picture. This triangle is an alignment of learning goals, assessment, and classroom activity. In the center of this triangle is our students' learning. Now think about what it means for teachers to achieve instructional goals or outcomes through teaching and assessment. The first question we need to ask related to the learning goals for our students is, what do I want my students to learn? What do I want my students to be able to do? Well, teachers must decide not only what they want students to learn from their experiences in the classroom, but also how to enhance students' learning outside of the classroom. And we need to ask how we will monitor and evaluate learning, or what information is essential to determine whether my students have met or exceeded the required expectation. And then, what will my students do to show that they have learned? What will I do as teachers? And what will my students do as learners? Given the evidence that we plan to collect during our course, we then need to identify the actual classroom activities that will support our students' learning and development. And then what is word assessing? Once you know what you want students to learn, the next step is to plan instructions come from three sources. The first one is your goals and objectives. The second one is the important performance you want students to learn how to do in your class. And the last one is the other forms of assessment you plan to use. It is important to emphasize that the starting point in teaching and assessing the progress of learners is to clearly define our learning goals or outcomes. Assessment serves as the key to examining learning and providing important information to teachers. This process is cyclical, as instruction is the process of providing support to learners through assessment and teaching. So in this sense, teaching and assessment are integral processes in learning. According to Biggs and Tang in 2011, and then Wiggins and McTeague in 2005, as stated in Cheng and Fox in 2017. Our goals need to be shared and discussed with our students. We know that when our students understand the goals or intended learning outcomes of a course and are aware of the evidence we plan to collect to support their learning and evaluate their progress, our students are more likely to meet or exceed our expectation. Now let's see the example. Let's take a detailed look at the context where learning goals are defined by a curriculum in the first picture. This is taken from the English as a second language curriculum for level 3 or ESLCO, which guides English language teaching in the public school in Ontario, Canada. This curriculum provides a considerable amount of guidance as to what you can do as a teacher and what your students can do as learners at a particular level of ESL. But these guidelines do not specifically define your assessment activities by stating what your students should do to show that they have learned. And the second picture is a page from ESL's curriculum, which provides specific details on overall expectation in listening and speaking. All right, that's all from me. Thank you for your kind attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello, my name is Raihani Fitri Salsabila with students number 2021-22051. In this opportunity, I would like to explain defining learning and defining learning outcomes in the subtopic how do we align our assessment and classroom activity with our learning goals and outcomes. But before I will explain the defining learning and defining learning outcomes, we have to know what is the meaning of alignment. According to Cheng and Fox in 2017, alignment means the degree of agreement among curriculum, instruction, standards, and tests. Alright, that is the meaning of alignment. Now let's start to explain the defining learning. More cognitive definition of learning would describe as a process of formulating new and more complex understanding of the world, as the process of revising and refining mental constructs, that is, the understandings that guide how we think, speak, and behave. The difference in definition will determine the nature of our assessment events that refers to how do we judge the right amount and frequency of our assessment activities and when should those activities take place, and then assessment tools that deals with how we choose the right assessment tools to measure what we intend our students to learn, and then assessment processes that intends to how we provide feedback to our students, including the type to support students. And the last is assessment decisions that focuses on how we ensure that our decisions are supporting our students' learning. Here are the 3 question examples to show that the kinds of learning or the kinds of process of learning. The first one is, what is the capital of United Kingdom? Second, what does 2 plus 2 minus 1 equal? And the last, what is the importance of the BBC in British media history? Now let's analyze each question. Question number 1 is an assessment of fact. So the learning type of this question is memory-based and limited to one or unit of information. So it only has one answer to this question. This question has right and wrong answer. There are students who know and do not know the answer, but if they do not know, they can find the correct answer relatively easily online. And question number 2 requires a different process of learning. There are students who count 2 plus 2 as the first step or 2 minus 1 as the first step. For example, the students who count 2 plus 2 as the first step. 2 plus 2 equal 4. 4 minus 1 equal 3. And then, students who count 2 minus 1 as the first step. 2 minus 1 equal 1. 2 plus 1 equal 3. See? The answer is same, but the process of learning to know the answer is different. And the last question. These questions has the varied learning outcomes and the learning process far more complex. Although there is one evidence answer, there is also the need to provide supporting evidence that illustrate its importance in British history. It happens because students have different opinion about how important the BBC in British media history, and of course by the support of the evidence that illustrate its importance in British history. Alright, after we know the definition and then the example of the process of learning by the questions, it can be concluded that our teaching and assessment should reflect such multiple and complex processes. Alright, now let's move to defining learning outcomes. According to Chang and Fox in 2017, learning outcomes state what our students should know and be able to do at the end of a course as a result of all of our activity, from lessons, assignments, feedback, and tasks. They may also be referred to as learning targets, which require teachers to specify what the student should know and or do as a result of instruction, the criteria for evaluating mastery or achievement of knowledge and performance. Learning outcomes set the agenda for a course and hold it together. They give us a clear sense of what our course is aiming for and then what we expect our students to achieve as a result of our teaching activity during a course. Our intended learning outcomes define the overall goals for all of our students in the classroom, and our assessment will be based on the degree to which our students meet those expectations. And then here I have the formula of learning outcomes. There are some phrases and then action verbs that illustrate the example of learning outcomes. Alright, here are the example. First, at the end of this course, student will or should be able to. Second, by the end of the course, students must show they can blah blah blah. And the last, in order to pass this course, students must demonstrate that they can blah blah blah. And then here are some action verbs. They are explain, identify, analyze, organize, evaluate, produce, distinguish, and many more. We usually find those phrases and action verbs in the syllabus of the course. So, learning outcomes can be concluded as the goals of the course that students need to achieve in the classroom. That's enough from me. I hope you can understand what I explained, and from the next material will be explained by my friend. Thank you.
Alright everyone, let me introduce myself first. My name is Salsa Amalia Nurpadilla. My student's number is 202122057, and now I would like to explain about taking stock, which is talking about the learning outcomes, backward design, and assessment task. Alright, when we have been arranged or making our learning outcomes, which include what we want our students to know, be able to do, and value by the course, we need to think about the most effective way to help the students in achieving that learning outcomes. And here, Wiggins and Mike Tai in 2005 have popularized the idea of backward design as a useful way to plan activity in a course by working backward from the intended learning outcomes to the assessment task and instructional activities. Why is this design categorized as one of the useful and effective ways to plan activities in a course? Because this design brings alignment between learning outcomes, activities, and assessment tasks. And it is correct to say that alignment in what is it and the assessment is not a new concept. Basically, it is a fundamental principle of criterion reference assessment, where this principle emphasizes the assessment task that must align with, reflect, and represent what we expect our students to learn and provide the benchmarks by which we will judge their achievement or mastery. And the first thing that teachers must do in creating this alignment is to follow a backward design, where teachers must first identify the course they are currently teaching or planning to teach. And then teachers must consider its purpose, the level of the students enrolled in the course, and how much time the teachers have for the course. And after that, teachers need to think about the learning outcomes. And generally, there are 4 until 6 learning outcomes for a course. And of course, the learning outcomes must always be in line with the applicable curriculum so that teachers know which criteria should be oriented when evaluating their quality. And then there are some of the criteria that we can apply to evaluate their quality. The first one is the outcome attainable? Are my students at a level that will allow them to meet or exceed my expectations given the purpose and amount of the time allowed for the course? And then the next one is the outcome specific and clear? Is it fundamentally important? And how exactly will my students demonstrate that they have met my expectations? What specific evidence will I collect to show that they have met or exceeded the learning outcome? And then the last one is could a student pass in my class without meeting this learning outcome? And if you, as a teacher, answered yes to this question, it would be a good idea to reconsider and revise. And after the learning outcome are arranged, and then the teachers need to think about what assessment task would allow them to evaluate whether their students have met or exceeded their expectations during the course. Teachers should provide the detailed activity and provide the detailed information about what aspect of learning does each activities represent. And then the last step is that must be taken by the teachers, is to evaluate the assessment task and activities given to the students. Are the assessment task and activities provided by the teachers in line with the learning outcomes and have been able to assist their students in achieving these learning outcomes? This is the point that must be considered by the teachers. And maybe that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening and for your nice attention. I give it to the next presenter.
Alright, let's move on to the next topic, which is connecting learning outcomes to tasks. Learning outcomes provide all the overall goals provided in the learning outcomes. In the end of the learning process, students will be able to do in the end of learning process. And according to Sheng, there are 5 types or aspects involved in learning process. The first one is knowledge and simple understanding. The second one is deep understanding and reasoning. And the third one is skill. The fourth is product. And the fifth is effect. Knowledge and simple understanding is know to how. Deep understanding and reasoning. Skill, which is development and proficiency. Product, which is performance. And effect, which is personal development, self-efficiency, self-assessment, and goal setting. And according to Sheng also, there are first steps in connecting learning outcomes to tasks. The first step is define the learning outcome itself, so that all the activities is directed in order to achieve the learning outcomes. And at the end of the learning period, students will be able to do the learning objective. And the second one is undertake a task analysis can be begin with the listing. The more details what the students will able to do at the learning of period. And also in this step, we are also listing the learning process involved, which is what I have studied before: knowledge and simple understanding, know to how, deep understanding and reasoning, skills, development and proficiency, product, which is performance, and effect, which is personal development, self-efficiency, self-assessment, and goal setting. And the third one is define higher levels of analysis, so that there will be a variety between the one students and the other students. The students will have more interest and skill on particular object will more have a more great result rather than students with less interest and less skills in one particular or more particular learning task. And also, at the connecting learning outcomes to tasks, there are some steps in process of the connecting itself. The first one is envision. Envision is imagining what are the students in the learning period is look like. And the next one is exercise, so we can have a more several and particulars do in learning process, so that will be more able students result. And the next one is appreciate what we have to do at the end of learning period. And the last one is evaluate, so that why the particular students will have more skills rather than other students. I think that's enough from me. I return back to the moderator.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Fauzia Zahra. My student's number is 202122048. Alright, without further ado, let's discuss the topic. Whether formative assessment, summative assessment, or diagnostic assessment are embedded in every activity and event within a course. Planning requires us to answer some key questions about a course. And assessment during a course should be viewed from both horizontal and vertical perspectives. We have clarified the purpose, participants, resources, and restrictions that apply. We have the background necessary to design a course that will stimulate and engage our students and increase their understanding and application of learning. So this is an illustration of aligning course activity and assessment tasks with intended learning outcomes through horizontal and vertical course planning and design. The horizontal plan begins with the intended learning outcomes and the assessment tasks, for example, quizzes, presentations, portfolios, reports, or group interactions, which we will use to collect evidence of our students' learning. Through defined learning outcomes and backward design, we move from the outcomes of the course and their assessment to the day-by-day activity in the course. And the next, the vertical plan consists of the day-by-day activity in a course. It maps assessment, tasks, activity, events, and resources in time onto the intended learning outcomes of a course. And then we have example of curricular guidelines from the ESL curriculum for listening and speaking. It provides an organizational model for planning which links to the horizontal or overall design of the course with the vertical or day by day. We may wish to use the headings here as a means of developing our own course design, taking into account how much time we have to support our students' mastery of the intended learning outcomes. It is to use speaking skills and strategies to communicate for a variety of classroom and social purposes. After arranging the time allocation and intended learning outcomes, then we determine the form of the assessment as evidence collected and tasks. Here, for example, the ESL curriculum uses formative feedback, observational notebook, and self-assessment because this is an activity in the class. Of course, don't forget to determine the types of activities to be carried out, which include there must be a purpose for the activities to be carried out, events, which is what activities will be carried out in day-by-day activity and resources, by aligning course activities and assessment tests with intended learning outcomes through horizontal and vertical course planning and design, we can more easily carry out course activities and assessments. It's enough from me. The next material will present by my friend. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Siti Alifatunisa with students number 202122075, and today I would like to share about a template for course planning or syllabus design. A template is provided here for planning course. It serves as a homework for assignment or as in a classroom activity. We need to answer each of question in this template. We can use a range of approaches or strategies to elicit the information required. For example, conversation with colleagues, reviewing materials, interview, questionnaires, focus group. It might be useful to examine other or previous program description, syllabus, course document, calendar, or curricular description. There are three steps to identify in this template. The first step, explore the critical background information that situation the course within the key feature of teaching and learning context, informed by the context information generated in step 1. Step 2, provided a guide for planning the overall or horizontal direction, scope, of the course. See question 5 until 6, and the activities and the event that define what happened in day-by-day sequence of the course, and see questions 7 until 9. Step 3 is connect the horizontal to vertical planning using the model in table. Step 1. Question 1 until 4 help to identify the specific characters of the course, which will influence the decision we make in course planning. Answer to this question provided teachers with essential background. Question number 1 is, what is this course necessary? Type of course. Number 1 is ESL, English as a second language, language that instruction in a context where English is spoken extensively outside in the classroom context. And the second is EFL, English as a foreign language, language instruction in context where English is used in the classroom but another or other language are used extensively outside in the classroom context. And then there are ESP, English for specific purpose such as engineering, business, nursing. And the next is EIP, English for academic purpose. And then settlement, language instruction for newly arrived immigrants. And the next is test preparation, is language instruction to support test performance. And the last is immersion, is content-based instruction in the target language. And then having specified of type of course, what is pricing it is proposed, and then it is the curriculum or educational framework within which each course is embedded, explicit or implicit. And then question number 2 is, who is the stakeholder? From students is age, background relevant to the course or program, for example for academic, linguistic, or cultural. Needs relevant to the purpose of the course, lack relevant to the purpose of the course or program, and wants relevant to the purpose of the course. And then from teacher is training or educational background, experience relevant to the program, philosophy of teaching and learning, needs, lack, and wants. And other key from stakeholder is for example principal, coordinator, owner, parents, expectation, impact, influence, and history. And the next for question number 3 is, where will the course take place? What are the key features of the learning space? Or what is the typical context of instruction in the case of syllabus design? For example, from in the classroom, physical space in the school, online space in the computer lab, or in 3D virtual learning space. and from workplace such as engineering firm, business office, hotel meeting room, and then space or resources, material from photocopy facilities, paper, chalk, and so on, resources, class size, room configuration, and others like library, volunteer, guest speaker, and so on. And the last question from step 1 is when will the course take place? Like total time allowed, like what months and what contact days, what contact hours, and how is contact time subdivided, like what hours per week, what classes per week of course. Step 2. Having considered the key background, we are now ready to plan our course in specific details. Question 5 until 7 help to frame the macro level or overall direction of the course, which might be considered the horizontal perspective in course planning. Question 7 until 9 relate to the day-to-day planning of activity in a course, the vertical perspective in course planning. Question number 5 is what are the intended learning outcomes for the course, identifying outcomes. Question number 6 is how will I evaluate the overall effectiveness, impact, usefulness of the course. Question number 7 is how will I know my students have learned what I have taught. How will I assess their learning in relation to the intended outcomes of the course. Question number 8 is what will be taught, and question number 9 is how will the course be taught. The last step is step 3 is now use the table below to connect to day-to-day assessment with overall course purpose and day-to-day activity. You can use table 2.1 as the example to follow.
My name is Osinopiani with NPM 2021222065. I will explain about looking back in chapter 2. In chapter 2, we considered what to access in relation to goals, expectation, and our identification and definition of intended learning outcomes for a course. We examine how to write and evaluate learning outcomes, their relationship with assessment tasks and class activity, and how they are influenced by the context in which we teach. Our focus in this chapter was on alignment and backward design from learning goals and outcome to assessment tasks and activity. Alright, thank you for all the presenter who had conveyed the materials. I hope this material will be useful for us and thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.